We do have a quorum with myself, Council Members Benton, Bradford, Gregg, Vice Chair Huffman, Councilmember Prep T, and Councilmember Weiner. We also have a public comment. So pursuant to Council Rule 28, the public comment period at committee meetings is limited to items that appear on the committee agenda. All public comment speakers must present proof of Tennessee residency. Our speaker today is Mr. Steve Ryder, who will speak on RS 2025-1013. His ID has been checked, so just want everybody to know we did that off camera. And let me find the new... Oh, here we go. Mr. Ryder, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm generally supportive of the transfer of the collaborative applicant from MDHA to Office of Homeless Services. One of the roles and responsibilities of the collaborative applicant is to, quote, monitor continuum of care agencies for programmatic and financial compliance. And a problem that we've had is that we've had at least one service provider who's used homeless assistance program money to house people who are not homeless. And that's a real problem. I just think that we have to have some way to intervene in that. The contract that you have for these federal monies is with the service provider and HUD. We really don't have a mechanism to go out there and interfere, if you will, or for lack of a better word, into that business relationship. And that is a real problem. And the service provider that I really don't need to name, they know that. They know that. And they say, oh, well, if we take this money from this, then these other people will become homeless. My point is this: we have tons of people that are homeless in this city. And the money that the federal government allocates for this specific reason is not being used properly. And that has to stop. So I would like to get a commitment from the Office of Homeless Services that they will monitor and that Metro Legal will go out there, and if it's shown on HMIS that they're not documented homeless, that those monies are returned. The taxpayers expect this money to go to homeless, and some of the money is not. And I'm a real stickler on this issue because I watch this sort of stuff, and I'm a member of the general membership of the continuum of care. We need to do better than what we've been doing. So thank you very much. I look forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. We're going to move on, and we will go to our consent agenda, or proposed consent agenda. Before I do that, I do want to acknowledge Vice Chair Huffman for very ably leading the meeting while I was out of town, and so I appreciate him doing that. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Huffman. And I'd also like to welcome Council Members Nash and Kimbrough have joined us since I called the roll. So my proposed consent agenda is item number 1, RS 2025-1008. Item number 4, RS 2025-1012. And then item number 8, BL 2025-692. Is there anyone who would like any of those items to be removed from my proposed consent agenda? Look, it's a new year. I did a better job of anticipating what people would want to talk about. How about that? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started, and then I'll check again to make sure that there's nothing that you would like to see removed after I get done reading everything. First item on the proposed consent agenda is RS 2025-1008, a resolution approving amendments 3 and 4 to a Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act WIOA grant from the Tennessee Department of Labor in conjunction with the Northern Middle Tennessee Local Workforce Development Board to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Action Commission to establish programs and services in an integrated workforce system as a career services provider through the American Job Center. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Huffman, and others. Then we're going to item number 4, RS 2025-1012, a resolution approving Amendment 1 to a contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health and the State of Tennessee Department of Health to provide for the administering of environmental health programs. Then we have item number 8, BL 2025-692, an ordinance to approve a clinical affiliation agreement by and between Vanderbilt University and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Davidson County Drug Court to cooperate in the implementation of a program of clinical instruction and training for nursing students at the Vanderbilt University School of Nursing. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Huffman, Welsh, and others. Is there anybody that would like to remove any of those items from consent? All right, do I have a motion? Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, thank you. We have 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting on our consent agenda. Okay, we're going to move now to our next item that is not on consent, RS 2025-1009, a resolution to approve an intergovernmental mutual aid agreement by and between the Metropolitan Nashville Department of Communications, a department of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, and the Fairfax County Department of Public Safety Communications. Sponsors Porterfield and Evans. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. We do have a substitute. Can we move the substitute? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Do we have an explanation of the substitute? Oh, you're on already. All right. Oh, wait, no, you're not. There we go.
Okay. The substitute is a housekeeping substitute to change the names of the parties to be consistent with the agreement.
Okay, thank you, Director Darby. Any discussion on the substitute? Can we get a motion to add the substitute? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's all vote on the substitute. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, so now we're going to move to the item as amended. And that was 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. And so I had a couple of questions for the department. And so we'll start with my questions. And so if you want to go to the back, Director Martini, and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Martini, the Director at the Department of Emergency Communications.
Okay, thank you, Director Martini. So I guess one of the questions when I was reading everything, can you help us understand, as far as these relationships with other cities, because I know we've had some of these come through before. Is there any kind of minimum number of calls that Metro needs to be handling as opposed to kind of when they could potentially be rerouted, to another city?
Sure. In each of these situations, these are disaster recovery solutions only. So the only reason somebody else is answering a phone call that should be routed to a Davidson County dispatcher is in the situation where network or otherwise we cannot answer that call. We will exhaust every method to deliver that call to a Davidson County dispatcher before it rolls somewhere else.
And can you explain for everybody kind of how we define disaster in those circumstances?
Sure. We're talking about immediate and total critical infrastructure failure.
Okay. And how many cities do we currently have kind of these mutual aid relationships with?
Sure. Right now, we have one with Williamson County routing our non-emergency calls. This was in reaction to the Christmas Day bombing in 2020. We actually kept our 911 calls in that scenario, but we're unable to receive or make any non-emergency calls. So we've entered a partnership with Williamson County to leverage a part of their phone system to get calls back to us should that occur.
Okay.
This is the first kind of on the 911 side with Fairfax County, Virginia, that allows us to consider the impacts that may be regional that removes them from whatever we may be experiencing.
Okay, got it. And then so this isn't related to staffing or like, let's cut headcount or change anything really about the dynamics of your department. It's really just about kind of the disaster component.
Absolutely. If we got into a situation that we had a major impact to the local area, but one person could still make a phone call, we want to make sure that call can still get answered and help can still get sent.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Director Martini. I see a couple hands. Let me get Councilmember Huffman, and then I'll get Councilmember Prep-T. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bradford, you're recognized. I did hit the right button, even though I said the wrong name.
Well, there is quite a difference here. My question is for Director Martini. With these relationships, is this just a one-way, like they help us out, or is it like if they experience issues, we'll help them out?
Yep, two-way.
All right. And then the second question is, I follow your logic about having someone, in Virginia in case there's something going on in Middle Tennessee. Are we looking at potentially partnering with other cities and other regions in case, there's something that impacts the Eastern Seaboard and us, like maybe partnering with a West Coast or Midwest?
That's very possible. We are at the early stages. There's only one other pair of 911 centers in the country that have even explored the technology behind this. None have explored the governance and operational pieces. So we are leading this conversation in the country here as other states and cities develop the infrastructure to support this, and it's an opportunity. Sure, we'll consider those opportunities that make sense.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me get Councilmember Prep T recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for being here. My question is, what additional training would be required under this agreement? Because one of the things that I appreciate about our 911 operators is that they know Davidson County really well. Every single time that I've called them and tried to give a location, they've been able to help me out on being able to better describe where I am. So I guess sort of what training will Davidson County operators receive about sort of the geographics of Fairfax County and vice versa?
In the coming weeks, we're going to send members of our tactical incident dispatch teams, those leaders of those tactical incident dispatch teams. When you think of these roles, we have 4 8-person tactical incident dispatch teams that we use to send to a variety of places. They've responded to the Alabama coast, to Florida, following hurricane impacts, and sat in the seats of those dispatchers using their equipment in their home offices to answer the calls. Those folks already have received kind of a level above training of how to work in these non-routine circumstances. So we're going to send those folks to Fairfax to get an understanding of how they operate, how they work. We're going to use, it really comes down to the technology. We're going to use an agnostic computer-aided dispatch system that is neutral to both of us, that can be accessed through the web. So there's nothing, we don't have to learn their lingo. They don't have to learn our lingo. We're going to collectively learn. Plain language is the standard. FEMA said that, for FCC said that right after 9/11, truly, that says we don't use a lot of coded language in these mutual aid environments, so there's not confusion over who says what, right? A crash is a crash. A heart attack is a heart attack. It's just very critical to what it is. We're also going to leverage technologies that exist through partners we both share that have similar maps from both jurisdictions. So if we take a phone call from Fairfax or our phone call is answered in Fairfax, they're looking at a Nashville map with Nashville data, that dispatcher, and they're using local information to make that decision and enter that address so that we can get it back and dispatch the responders to the street. So the training will be solid, but the technology solutions we're leveraging to make sure that what we're looking at is very similar is even more so. And I will say about half of our dispatchers drive in from surrounding counties to work in here. So some of our folks, the only times they see Davidson County is on their commute.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Prep T. Any other questions for Director Martini? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, we recommend approval. Looks like Councilmember Suarez joined, so does that bump us up? We're still 10? Okay, 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. All right, let's go to item number 3, RS 2025-1011, a resolution approving an urban area security initiative grant application and accepting an urban area security initiative grant award from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Office of Emergency Management to enhance the protection of soft targets and crowded places by increasing the ability of police emergency response teams to detect, deter, protect, and when needed, respond to soft target terrorist attacks. Do I have a motion? Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. I didn't read the sponsors. Sponsors are Porterfield, Evans, Huffman, and Ellis. I would like, who is representing the department today? Is that Captain Cantrell in the back? Are you answering these questions? I just have a couple. And if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Captain Kelly Cantrell with Metro Nashville Police Department.
Thank you for being here. So I guess I wanted to explore a little bit about the soft targets and crowded places and things like that. Just provide a little context for anybody that might be watching this later.
So the command center that we're looking to use these funds to upgrade is what we utilize during special events, during critical incidents. It's what we take our software with us to the response and try to have available and ready for us to utilize in those particular situations.
And so is that part of the mobile command center?
Yes,
Got
it
it.
is.
Okay. How about any questions for Captain Cantrell? Looks like Councilmember Prep T has a question. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Captain Cantrell. Could you elaborate a little more on specifically what qualifies or what MNPD defines or what the Office of Emergency Management defines as a soft target?
Great question. As far as what my understanding of that would be like our large crowd events. So concerts, parades, our 4th of July, firework, New Year's Eve, all of those would be what we would consider to be soft target events where we would want to have an immediate response capability. Hopefully it would never happen, but if we were to have a situation like New Orleans or New York, other places like that.
Councilmember, do you have any other questions?
That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How about any other questions for Captain Cantrell? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for being here, Captain Cantrell. Sort of on topic, one of the things that I'm acutely aware of and concerned about is the susceptibility of some of our harder targets, specifically with our power grid. So like here by the courthouse or by the Birch building, we've got a power station that I think we could do a better job at making sure that it's a little more secure. And so I guess more of a comment or a request, I'd love to be able to meet with you and with others at MNPD, just contemplating how we can ensure that a lot of those potential targets that I think are susceptible here in Davidson County, that we're bolstering our ability to make sure that they're less susceptible to attacks. But thank you.
Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Prep T. Looks like Councilmember Bradford has a question. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. The line of questioning from Councilmember Prep T brought this to my attention. I like where he was going, and instead of it being maybe a meeting between himself and MNPD, would this be a potential for maybe a special call meeting of public health and safety for both MNPD, OEM, Nashville Fire, sheriffs, kind of present to us kind of
So
what our status is on some of our hard targets?
My immediate challenge with that is I think there's probably a lot of confidentiality around some of those targets potentially, and then also our response. And so if I would like, what I would like to see happen, since Councilmember Prep T expressed interest, if he could go ahead and move forward with having that discussion, and then, I mean, we can explore it, but that's the immediate response that I think in my head is there's probably a lot we don't want on a publicly recorded meeting. But good question. How about any other questions? Okay. All those in favor of this item? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? Thank you, Captain Cantrell. We recommend approval. 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Okay, our next item is RS 2025-1013, a resolution approving an amendment to a continuum of care grant agreement between the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and the Metropolitan Department of Housing Agency, MDHA, replacing MDHA, the original grant recipient with the Office of Homeless Services, as the replacement recipient of the Continuum of Care Programming Grant in the amount of $381,251 for Continuum of Care planning activities. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, and Allen. Do I have a motion? Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. I have a couple of questions, and so Mr. Clendenning, are you going to speak to these today? Cool. Thank you for coming up, and if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Bill Clendenning, Grants Coordinator for the Office of Homeless Services.
Thank you very much. And so could you just provide some context around kind of the shift into Metro Nashville, becoming the collaborative applicant and kind of what this means, and then the grant amount, how we're defining, continuum of care planning activities. I think any of us who have been involved in working with you understand that idea, but there's probably folks in the committee that don't necessarily know what that means. questions.
Of course. And I did craft an email that went to Brown Sexton, so I'll just kind of use that as a basis, if that's okay.
Sure.
But the collaborative applicant is responsible for submitting the consolidated application for the community. And in Nashville, that role has been held by MDHA for about 30 years. In 2022, HUD technical assistants recommended that position be transferred in alignment with national best practices. The COC formed an ad hoc committee to create a process for the application and designation of a collaborative applicant. OHS submitted an application that was evaluated by the COC Performance Evaluation Committee and presented to the COC general membership. In November 2023, that body voted to begin the transition of collaborative applicant from MDHA to OHS. Since that time, we've been working really closely with MDHA to change the HUD designation of collaborative applicant. We've met frequently to plan for the transfer of duties to make the change as seamless as possible. We've worked with HUD TA to receive report around the change. There have been many meetings, so it's been going on about a year and a half, it seems. And it was a multi-step process, and this step is the last step in all that process. It actually transfers the program grant, the COC program grant with the funds, the 381, 251, from MDHA to OHS. One of the good things about where we are with this is that the OHS doesn't need to use any of this for salaries. It'll all go straight to planning and training for the community. There's already plans for CTI, critical time intervention, case management training, and other trainings like that. So it's all going to be community forward funding.
And is that, I guess, on that clarification around training, and so particular to case management, is that going to expand the people who are building their skill at being case managers or open up more case management opportunities for some of the organizations that we're collaborating with in Davidson County?
That's the goal, yes, ma'am. CTI is one of the evidence-based best practice for case management. And it's harder. It's more, a time restrictive model. And right now, the contributor is doing a great job with it. But we do feel like the community could benefit from that kind of training. So our assistant director of program, Marvin Trotter, has been setting that up, working with the organizations to create awareness of that. So we do think it's going to be, beneficial.
Okay, that's cool. And because I remember listening, and I don't remember which HPC meeting it was, but listening to one of the recordings, and there was kind of one of the members who expressed concern that that was a real challenge for the county, that we don't have enough people that can do the case management part to kind of get people connected to kind of some of the housing options, that are around. So I'm glad that that is something that we'll be able to invest in as part of this funding. And is there any, and I know it's early, but I'm going to start asking this probably at every committee meeting, any concerns related to HUD that you all have heard of in light of our shift at the federal level and how federal funding is being scrutinized?
Yes. There were a couple of days where the HUD systems, ELOCs, eSNAPs, and SAGE were all closed, but they did open back up. And then we have just an email went out to the Continuum of Care actually just a minute ago, and I've got it on my phone. But it kind of addresses the fact that the National Alliance to End Homelessness, who is we work closely with, has issued a statement saying that they believe FY 2024 COC funding is at extreme risk. So we wanted to bring that awareness to all the funded agencies to make sure they're aware of that. And, hopefully they're going to do some sustainability or, contingency planning for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for bringing that to our attention as well. And then is there any response, I guess, since you're up here, related to our public comment about the relationship with the organization that was brought up in public comment?
Definitely. We, seeing as this change is just officially happening, MDHA, Susie told me, was responsible for the monitoring for the COC-funded agencies. But we did do that alongside her. We went to all of the monitoring visits, and we're part of that process because we want to make sure, we want to see how she did it. We wanted to learn, more about that process. And we are already preparing for this year. It's an off year for the NOFO because it's a 2-year NOFO, so that gives us even more time and resources to monitor. And one of the tools, I think Mr. Ryder mentioned that we don't have any, we don't have a stick, right, in this, but we do actually, because reallocation is a process that can be used by the community to reallocate funds from low-performing or non-performing agencies to ones that are performing at a higher level. And that's really the role of the Performance Evaluation Committee. But they are taking note of agencies that aren't performing as well historically, so that is a conversation.
Okay, so there is a place where people can go to raise those concerns about a particular agency if there's something that is not happening the way it needs to.
Right.
Okay. Councilmember Weiner, you have a question, so let me recognize you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. I'm going to actually follow up on that last question. Can you share with us at a future meeting the specific process that you go through and the frequency with which you engage that process so that we'll understand better how you identify and how you manage those issues when the funds are being misused and you find out about that?
Of course.
Great, thank you.
And I will say that as a funder of ARP and COC and Metro funds, we take that very seriously. And we meet with each grantee every month. We don't want it to wait until monitoring to see something. We want to be in communication with them all the time. We also look at their data on a constant basis. A lot of it's committed, it is reported to you. So we're very much trying to be proactive on that so that there are no surprises. We don't like surprises. So.
Thank you.
All right, how about any other questions for Mr. Clendenning? Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, all those in favor of this item? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? We lost Councilmember Bradford to another committee, so we've got 9 in favor. Oh, no, he's back, but he's probably not voting. I assume you're not voting because you didn't hear anything. All right, so we're 9 in favor. 0, anyone against? Anyone not voting? Okay, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting, and we recommend approval. Okay, let's go to my next item. That's bills on second reading. It's item number 6, BL 2025-690, an ordinance amending section 13.08.080 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws pertaining to the use of community safety camera network. Sponsors Horton, Weiner, Cortez, and others. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. I will recognize the sponsor as a starting point, and then we'll see what questions everybody else has. Let me find Councilmember Horton. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, for having me here today. What this bill does is establish a legal framework, guardrails, and public oversight and reporting requirements for any community safety camera network. In practical terms, that's FUSIS or any other similar program. Overall, the goal of this legislation is to address some of the sincere, legitimate community concerns that we heard during the last FUSIS debate, while simultaneously not impairing the intended use of the program by MNPD. Happy to go into any of the individual provisions in detail as relevant, but conceptually, I think it's helpful to think of this legislation in 2 broad categories. First, a guardrail section, and second, an oversight portion. The guardrail section imposes restrictions on how, when, for what purposes the program could be used, as well as who can access it, while the oversight provision accomplishes things like reporting, notification requirements, audit requirements, public hearings, and things like that. So happy to answer any questions anybody might have regarding any of the individual provisions as helpful to the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Horton. Any discussion on this item? Well, okay, I'll go to Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a rather robust discussion on this topic, a very important one. It's definitely important that we hear every perspective from this to ensure that we get these guardrails right. I know from the discussion going on, there seems to be some desire to potentially add additional amendments. Those are not on there right now. I want to be respectful of everyone's opinions in the process. And with that said, I want to make a motion for a one meeting deferral with a re-referral to Public Health and Safety.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor for a one meeting deferral with a re-referral back to Public Health and Safety. Do we have discussion on this motion? It looks like Councilmember Prepty, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate my colleague, Councilmember Huffman, for making the motion because very rightfully so. In considering this legislation and looking at the one amendment that we have before us, there are a couple of areas that I think that we could add some robust language as it specifically relates to probable cause and exigent circumstances, as well as looking at the reporting requirements and auditing requirements. And so I'm in the process of specifically drafting up some language that I want Metro Legal and MMPD to have ample opportunity to take a look at. And so in the same spirit, I am going to make a superseding motion for a 2-meeting deferral with a re-referral back to committee. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so we have a superseding motion with a re-referral back to committee. Any discussion on this motion? Councilmember Huffman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate my colleagues' desire to defer this an additional meeting. However, I do want to express the importance of doing this in a timely manner. I think 2 weeks is plenty of time. We've been discussing this for months now. I think 2 weeks additionally adds plenty enough timeline to get us over the hump.
Thank you. Councilmember Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I have to agree. Now, I believe that really good legislation that comes before us has been thoroughly vetted. And I agree that we need to make sure that everybody has a voice. But we've been at this for quite a while. We've heard what the community had concerns about insofar as the guardrails and the oversight. And this is a good piece of legislation that is having really good conversation about. I think 2 weeks is more than enough. And frankly, if it comes back to us in 2 weeks and we decide we need more time, we have the option to refer it again. So I'm going to support the original deferral motion. Thank you.
In the interest of, because I think couldn't tell if I saw Commander Nash over here, but in the interest of kind of balanced conversation, I'm going to come over here to Councilmember Suara, and then I'll come back to you, Commander Nash.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak in support of the 2-meeting deferral. I think it's a good thing that everybody is saying 1 minute meeting is enough, but I think we have to look at all sides and who decides whether it's enough or not, or if all the sides have the amendment or the discussion that they want to have in there. Personally, I think that this is a bill that there cannot even be enough guardrails to it, in my opinion. But I commend those that are trying, and I love the idea that Councilmember Prepty says he's working on some things that he feels like would make him comfortable with it, or at least get him to a point. And I think we should respect that. And so with that, I want to support the 2 meetings deferral.
Thank you, Councilmember Suara. Councilmember Nash, hold on just a second. I cannot find you. Oh, here you are. Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think my question was answered. I was concerned that should we just do the 1-meeting deferral and conversation at our next meeting indicated we probably could use another deferral, that it wasn't going to automatically upset the, we can get the second deferral without it having to start all over again?
Right, because this is a new ordinance, and so we're kind of starting from scratch on this.
And I guess in favor of either one of the deferral motions, I know the amendment spoke to having cameras in residential areas, and I think we all support the idea that we don't want to look at your front door for sure. But I do have some concerns about how it's written, how that was going to affect multi-use facilities, for instance, where you have a business downstairs and the residence is upstairs and coming and going, and parking lot issues. I know when I was in sex abuse, a good percentage of sex crimes take place in residential settings. Home invasions, by their definition, occur in residential settings. So I want to make sure that we don't necessarily lose the ability to follow up on those and get some good data on those crimes too. So just as we move forward, I hope the sponsor of that amendment might look at that and see if that would, how we might make sure we address those issues.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. Councilmember Prep T.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, obviously I'm speaking in support of my motion for a two-meeting deferral. Specifically, what a two-meeting deferral will provide us is the opportunity for everybody to engage substantively in the legislative process. And to be able to, again, to have the requisite conversations with MNPD, with Metro Legal to make and to give them ample opportunity to provide us the legal guidance that we need, because we're delving into issues of constitutionality and making sure that we are doing all that we can, not only just to protect our citizens from constitutional encroachment, but also protecting Metro from any potential liability. So I think it's important that we do this in the proper time. I also can appreciate that we appreciate the point of expediency. But I do think that a two-meeting deferral gives every single member, not only of this committee, but of the council body as a whole, to be able to examine what areas they wish to bring amendments. And Madam Chair, if I could, I would ask the sponsor if he has any opinions on the deferral motions as well.
Councilmember Horton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councilmember Prep Teat. I think it's important that we, don't delay for delay's sake, but also don't want to rush. I think informing this debate, Councilmember Ewing and I had a publicly noticed meeting, I think last week, and Councilmember Gadd had mentioned at the last council meeting that they each have separate amendments they intend to bring surrounding third-party audits and the content of the annual report generated to council. They did not submit the amendments for this committee meeting. I would like the opportunity to discuss with them at the next committee meeting rather than waiting a full month to discuss with them. I think, and if more discussion is merited after that, it would, of course, support an additional deferral at that time if it's appropriate. But I'd like to speak with them sooner rather than later about it.
Thank you, Councilmember Horton. Councilmember Porterfield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just stand to rise in support of the two-meeting deferral. That is the motion that's currently on the floor. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so thank you so much for that. And thank you to Councilmember Perpty for bringing that. I do think that will give us the opportunity to go through the proper channels, have the conversations with MNPD, legal, and any other stakeholders that need to be a part of this conversation. I would like to remind our colleagues that we do have Council Connect available to us, so we don't have to wait. Even if we do a two-meeting deferral, the sponsor does not have to wait to discuss potential amendments. They don't have to wait a month to discuss potential amendments. They can discuss that through Council Connect. So I stand in support of the two-meeting deferral, and I ask our colleagues to do the same.
Thank you. Councilmember Weiner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. In response, I love Council Connect. I think it's really effective. However, when you need to have real-time, face-to-face interaction, I think the opportunity for us to sit down in a noticed meeting would make a lot of sense. That way, we can all have our conversation. Everybody can really listen to each other and hear what we say and come up with better solutions when we're sitting at the table together than through the impersonality of Council Connect. So I, again, support a one-meeting deferral instead of two. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Weiner. I'm going to ask a question of the sponsor. So based on kind of what you have been socializing, with colleagues about amendments and their interest in moving some things forward and having more discussion and that kind of thing, do we need to have a work session specific to your legislation?
Well, in the interest of everyone's time, I find this committee to be a useful forum for discussion. And I know a lot of us have busy
Other
personal lives, professional lives. I want to be sensitive to people's time. My preference would be to have it here in your committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I heard the sponsor correctly. I would like to support the one meeting deferral with a promise from the sponsor that as those discussions appear at our next meeting, that if we need to go ahead and defer one more time, that you'd be supportive of that, and we'd all agree.
Councilmember Horton.
Yes, if we're back in committee and based on the conversations that's happened and the amendments that are brought, I think it's important that we have a full discussion. And if an additional deferral is merited at that time and we need additional time to flesh these issues out, I would strongly support a deferral as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this deferral motion? Vice Chair Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. That was a very important distinction that my colleague, Mr. Nash, made. I think it's really important that we step through this in a way where we are respectful of everybody's time, number one, but we also allow enough time for any amendments that would potentially get added. 2 weeks is more than sufficient. If for some reason that does not work out and we need more time, it's there, it's available. That's why we have the legislative process. It's more than anything, though, the need for this technology is out there. It's in my community. It's in a lot of yours. I don't think I'm unique to the criminal problems that are currently.
Is this on the deferral?
All going on. Yes,
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it is. One meeting is 2 weeks. That is plenty of time. A 2-meeting deferral means that we are pushing this off for another month. I'd rather get this going. So I want to renew my motion for a 1-meeting deferral. You can do that.
We're just going to, Vice Chair Huffman, we're just going to vote on this motion, and then depending on the outcome, then we will determine about doing a are you doing a point of information?
Point of order,
Point
yeah.
of order.
Since I made
Director
the
Darby?
original motion and my motion was superseded, I do still have the original motion.
I love parliamentary procedure, don't all of you?
There was a motion for, do you want me to?
Yes, please.
My mic was still on. There was a motion for a 1-meeting deferral, and ostensibly that motion was amended to be a 2-meeting deferral. And that is the motion that is currently on the floor. And I don't think it's proper to amend to another date certain that's the kind of original motion that was subsequently amended to go back. We need to vote on the motion to defer 2 meetings. And if that fails, then we can do a motion to defer for 1 meeting.
Is that okay? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Director. So the motion on the floor is a 2-meeting deferral. All those in favor of a 2-meeting deferral, please raise your hand because I'm going to have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 4 in favor of a 2-meeting deferral. All those against a 2-meeting deferral, please raise your hand. 7 in opposition. Oh, did you raise your hand too? Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Do against again because I think I might have just added you into my counting. That's 6. No, I'm not. I didn't count you. You voted against you voted in favor of the 2-meeting deferral. Yes. So this motion fails. It was 4 in favor, 6 against, 0 not voting. Councilmember Huffman.
I'd like to renew my motion for a 1-meeting deferral with a re-referral to public health and safety.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of a 1-meeting deferral and re-referral back to public health and safety. We got the same number of people? All right. All those in opposition to a 1-meeting deferral with a re-referral back to public health and safety? Nobody's voting against? Okay. Anyone not voting? All right. We got 2. Okay. That motion passed. I'm sorry? Yeah, you raised your hand. I'm only counting the people that raised their hand on that one. So anyway, that motion fails, so we will be back on this topic at our next meeting with a referral back.
It passed, the motion to defer one meeting passed.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say failed. Let's continue to talk about motions, though. That's my favorite thing. All right. With that, we're going to move on to item number 7, which is BL 2025-691, an ordinance to approve an affiliation agreement by and between Vanderbilt University Medical Center and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to provide student clinical interaction or instruction and training with the Davidson County Drug Court, and sponsors are Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, and others. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Who's representing for this legislation? Anyone? Was that the Health Department or Drug Court? I think this should have been on consent. I just didn't write it down to be on consent, so I really don't have any questions. So does anybody have any discussion on this item? All right, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, we're going to recommend approval. Okay. We were supposed to have a presentation from our Chief Defender, Martisha Johnson, and I have not seen her come in. Are you? Oh, here you are. I did not see you. You snuck in. Okay, we're ready for you. And so we'd like to welcome Chief Defender Martisha Johnson, who is coming up. And basically, after we had the October domestic violence meetings, I was able to meet with Vice Mayor, with Chief Defender Johnson, and she shared some of her perspectives related to some of those broader conversations around, changes in the court system, and really wanted to be able to convey, what does impact look like for her department. And so she's here with a presentation, and we're excited to have her. And thank you very much for coming. And so if you could, when you sit down, there is a clicker for you.
Sounds good, thank you.
And your microphone is on, I would say probably like 15 minutes or so. Does that work? And then we'll take questions. And your microphone should be on too.
Good afternoon. Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Evans, and to Vice Mayor Henderson for hearing my concerns after the October special called meetings that were held, and creating the space for our perspectives to be a part of the discussion. We were not a part of that discussion in October, and I thought that it was really important anytime we're having a robust discussion about the criminal legal system to have the perspective also included from our office. So I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. I know that the context of those conversations was really around efficiency in the legal system with respect to domestic violence. I always take an opportunity when I can to thank my staff members, some of whom who have joined me this afternoon. The 110 people who make up the staff of the Nashville Defender's Office. So often in the public we hear thank yous to our community helpers, but rarely with respect to public defenders, which is okay with us because we don't do it for the public acknowledgement or the thank you. But it is important as the leader of our office that anytime I have an opportunity, I thank the people that do this work because it is very much so an important and noble cause. And I appreciate the folks who have dedicated themselves to providing services and advocacy to our clients. I want to be frank. When I hear the word efficiency, especially when used in the context of speeding things up in the criminal legal system, it concerns me. It worries me. And in fact, I hear an infringement on your constitutional rights, frankly. I would like to frame the context of my remarks around a few things. I appreciate the discussion about speeding up the process in the legal system. I heard the conversations about creating rocket dockets. I heard the conversations about how, with respect to cases in the general sessions court and criminal court, we can make things happen faster. And I would just like to provide the perspective and to remind us that the individuals who have been charged with the crime have certain rights as well. And those rights are the right to have a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury, the right to know who the people are who are accusing you and confront them, to know the nature of the charges against you and the evidence against you, the right to have an attorney, which obviously that's the one I love the most and motivates me to do this work, but not only just have an attorney, but to have adequate representation throughout the process. They also have the right to challenge the evidence that's presented by the state. And also, I think something that we could stand to be reminded of quite frequently is that people have the right to be presumed innocent through their process. I know because I have spent several days of my own time talking about the criminal legal system and what issues persist in the system. And I would like to say that it is very complex. There is no one reason why things move the way they do, the amount of time that it takes for cases to move through the system. It is a complex situation, but a few things that I would like to highlight from our perspective in response to conversations about rocket dockets and speeding things up in the process is the public defender's office, quite frankly, and many of my colleagues who take indigent clients by the appointed process, we are already suffering with extreme workloads. When I said earlier, a person has the right to have an attorney and adequate representation, that can be greatly impacted by our workload. If I have too many cases, I am operating from a position of not being able to provide to my clients everything they are ethically entitled to. And many of the people who are representing folks in our legal system are suffering from those extreme workloads. I heard a lot of discussion from all of the stakeholders who presented in those conversations about resources. Everybody who presented, I think, asked for particular resources. They brought up their need for resources in this committee. And I want to make sure that I highlight that the resource disparities that exist are real. And they also contribute to the issues that we see, the delays that happen in our legal system are often due to the great disparities. I'm going to talk for a second about some of the context around the differences in budget. And this is not from a place of, I truly believe that to do excellent work, all of our agencies need to be resourced appropriately. And I support everybody doing excellent work. But I need to highlight that there is an extreme resource disparity that exists with people who are representing folks charged with crimes and people who are tasked with prosecuting and law enforcement of our city. The DA's office has 160 plus staff members, a $14 million metro budget, and their portion of the state's $126 million budget. The police obviously have more than 2,000 staff members and a $306 million budget. And our staff is 110 people. I have 60 lawyers and a $13.6 million budget. In order for us to be able to do this work well and to contribute to, creating the type of system that allows for fairness and justice in the process, we have to be mindful that any new resources that are allocated that don't include comparable resources for the public defender's office continue to aid in the imbalance that exists in our system. And when that imbalance exists, we're always playing catch up. And quite frankly, I feel like that all the time in the public defender space, that we are playing catch up to the new technologies that I hear talked about in this body, to the new technologies that are adopted by our city, to the new resources that are created. Those resources are not always equitably provided to the public defender. And so when we play catch up, it creates a situation where we're already on the defense by nature of who we are, but to be on the defense and also trying to represent people when you don't have the appropriate resources to do it threatens those ethical obligations that we have to provide representation, and then takes us back to the earlier slide, which is an infringement on their constitutional rights. And so I'm going to talk about that theme quite a bit in my remarks because I really think that We all understand that, and that is the place that I think as we talk about the system, we have to also be mindful of that. I also want to put in a plug. I would be remiss to be here and not put in a plug for the Public Defender's Office, right? And I'm bringing the data to support this plug that I make. A lot of what was talked about in that conversation was about time, how long it takes things to move through the system. How can we move the process along? And I want to tell you that the Public Defender's Office, to use the word that I dislike, but I know is a word that you all respect in this body about efficiency, we know that our numbers tell us that our agency is doing the work and doing it as efficiently as we can despite our workload and resource disparities. The data sets that we're going to look at over the next few slides are mainly from 2023, but on average in general sessions, it took an average of 114.6 days for cases to move through the system from arrest to disposition. Our cases moved at 100 days, so we were coming in under that total average, but also moving our cases through the system more efficiently, faster than the other private appointed lawyers and private lawyers who represent cases. And obviously, our agency has different resources than the appointed bar, but I want to highlight that this is something that we're concerned about and shows sort of how things are moving through. For cases for people who were in custody in general sessions, the on average number was 17.4 days, and our cases were 17.3 days. And for bond cases, those were 171 days. Ours were exceeding that just a bit at 193.3 days. In criminal court, our numbers, we know, get a little bit larger. At 365 days on average, the public defender number being 322 days. For those who were in custody, 265. Our cases were 216. And for those who were on bond, 431, our number was 408. I want to also address a couple of the other things that I heard during those October meetings. I really want this committee and the city to understand that the language barriers that exist for us in the courthouse for representing people who have who are non-English speakers, who need assistance from an interpreter, those resources are so limited and they are causing quite a bit of a delay through the process. I personally worked a DV docket the Friday after Christmas. We had one interpreter and a half. The half was because that interpreter had to leave to go to a funeral at 11 o'clock. We had one interpreter for 4 jail dockets that were running at various times in the courthouse. It is impossible for us to do our work if we don't have the interpretation services that we need. If we have to utilize the language line, which means we're picking up a phone and trying to talk to a client who is behind a glass wall and can't hear us well, and hoping that they can catch on to some of what is being said to them. We are providing them poor representation when we don't have the appropriate people who can help us speak to our clients. I know that one of the conversations that was had in October was with the Sheriff's Department around contracts that they are doing to try to increase interpretation services. And to date, our clients are still struggling to navigate their abilities to take classes, to be provided services in jail, and to be provided services in their language in the courthouse. I also touched on this a moment ago, but technology really slows down how long it takes us to be able to represent our clients. Every time something new is introduced, body cameras, license plate readers, documents that are technology that is provided to help in the prosecution or law enforcement of people, if we don't have the appropriate resources to be able to review that and advise our clients about that evidence, that is going to slow down the process. Ethically, I have to provide that information to our clients. And I have just 2 more things to say before I will be quiet to be a good steward of the time. A lot of what I heard in the conversation in October worried me because it was a lot of presumption of guilt. I heard a lot of conversation around why we needed to essentially move from arrest to labels that were used in those conversations about people who have been charged but not convicted of anything. And I want to remind everyone, as in the big global part of this conversation, is that just because we're talking about things being efficient doesn't always mean they're effective. And I really want to leave us in the context of that conversation with a reminder that this is not an assembly line at the courthouse. And in order to represent people and represent them well, we cannot be focused on moving things fast through the system, but we need to be focused on meaningful resources that allow us to have a fair and just process as a whole. So I will be quiet. I again appreciate the opportunity to both bring up the fact that I was disappointed at not being invited to those conversations in October, but also the space being created for me to have this conversation today. I appreciate the leadership for allowing that to happen.
Thank you, Defender Johnson. I really appreciate you being here. And I want to, before I get other questions from folks, can you speak more on the language barrier aspect and kind of the reference about having 1.5 that day? What is normal or what is optimal from your experience?
Optimal is, normal is that there are not enough interpretation services in the courthouse. That is normal. It is normal that we are running around the courthouse saying, I need a Spanish interpreter. And let us not get in the weeds of someone who has a different need outside of Spanish, if they have a particular, if they come from a different dialect, or if we need a service that is not Spanish. Those resources are even more complex and even more difficult to find, which result in delays in the process. That is the normal. The normal is that there are not enough. On a normal day, we could see 2 to 3 interpreters in general sessions court. The interpreters in criminal court are obtained a different way, but when you're talking about having a misdemeanor jail docket, a misdemeanor review docket, a felony jail and a felony review docket, and a domestic jail and review docket, you're talking about 6 different jail dockets running with people who may need language services on all of those dockets. And we're talking about 2 to 3 interpreters for the entire courthouse for that.
Thank you for highlighting that universal issue.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce Emily Herbert, the Deputy Public Defender, but she just brought up an important point. I just spoke to you about the jail dockets. The bond dockets are happening also all over the courthouse with those same few interpreters.
Thank you for highlighting that also, and I appreciate you being here, Ms. Herbert. How about questions from, we got Sherry Weiner, Councilmember Weiner, you're recognized.
Thank you. Defender Johnson, was so happy that you're here to share this. I think it's important for us to know. I am curious about getting some greater specificity insofar as the resources that you mentioned that would be more equitable, that would certainly help you do the job and keep the, I'm not going to call it the assembly line, because it's not. But I think it's important that we're able to at least intelligently look at what you specifically need and not walking in your shoes every day. It's hard for us to know what those things are. So, yeah, we know we need more interpreters, for sure.
Yes.
Is it as much a lack of interpreters as it is the funding for those interpreters?
Well, I would certainly say I think it's a little bit of both, but because I don't have any control over the funding requests for the courthouse or the agencies that are providing services in the court. I'm not sure what their issues are. I will say that right now, using the general sessions courts, there aren't interpreters that are on staff for the general sessions court. Those interpreters are independent contractors that are being paid for their services that way. And there just aren't enough of them. So I think it is both a lack of interpreters, and then I am not sure where the funding requests are. We have creatively found in our own budget this year the ability to retain 2 interpreters for our office. So we will be bringing on 2 interpreters within the next month. That's not going to be enough to help us with the load, but that's going to be a start for our office. And then to your greater question about resources, you know, I think it's that cost-benefit analysis that we're talking about. if what we're going to hear, and I think honestly you're going to hear tonight, even when some of the public comments start around the budget, some of what I anticipate you hearing is the lack of resources available in the courthouse for indigent defendants, people who can take on some of these criminal cases that are coming through the courthouse, which also results in a delay. If you don't have a lawyer, then your case can't be heard. And so when we're talking about workload, I have to view my workload from the workload standards that we utilize. And also in our past audit for Metro, we were audited for representing too many, we exceeded the recommended workload standards. But what I always say is, if you want us to take on more cases, we want to be able to do that as well. But I would have to have the funding to hire new people to do it, because the current staff that I have, they are already exceeding the recommended caseload for that. And so that's what I think the resource request for us, at least, will look like in this fiscal year, is additional resources to put more lawyers in each of the criminal court teams at the courthouse.
That's definitely helpful. What about the technology piece in terms of review of the technologies that may or may not become available?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. What you need to understand is every time a new piece of technology is introduced, somebody has to review that, because our clients are entitled to know the evidence against them. Right. So when a body-worn camera is worn in a stop, for instance, I was talking with a lawyer earlier today in the office. She was processing discovery for a kind of a simple case. And she had made it through half of one officer's body camera footage, and it had taken her 3 hours. So she still had the other half of that officer. There were 2 officers on the scene. So we were going to be talking about roughly 9 hours of body camera review for that one case. And ethically, I should be watching that body camera footage in every single case so that my client really knows the evidence against them. Capacity-wise, I don't have the ability to do that. And even when I exhaust the resources of investigators watching that, I only have 10 for the entire office. 10 investigators handling the caseload of the entire public defender's office. And so technology is rapidly advancing, but without the same, essentially, resources for people who can watch the footage, who can obtain the information and process it, then we are, again, behind. We're playing catch up because we can't keep up with the pace.
Thank you. I think this is helpful. I think it's important that we know what the need is specifically, and if there's anything else that you feel like we need to hear before we go into budget, I think it'd be important for us to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was curious, what percentage of the criminal cases coming to our court system does the public defender's office touch?
I'm going to break it down to you sort of in different areas. I'm going to base it off the official data that we have, which is from criminal justice planning, and it's going to be around the closed cases that we saw in 2023. So in 2023, we represented 41.4% of the closed cases in general sessions court for cases of people who were in custody, and these are in custody statistics, and the reason I'm pointing those out is because that's where we spend most of our resources for people who are in custody. In criminal court cases, the percentage we represented was 27.8 of the closed cases in criminal court for people who were in jail. Now, the closed case data is all that is available to us. The open case data is relative because, and I didn't pull this data set before I came, but what you will find is that in general sessions court, there are more than 10,000 still pending cases, open cases, and in criminal court, in each division, there are roughly between 300 and 700 pending cases open in each one of those divisions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commander. Councilmember Prepty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief Johnson, for being here. One of the things that my colleague, Councilmember Wiener, talked about is the technologies. And as technologies become more available, it's crucial that criminal defendants and their attorneys are provided access to it. But I know that just because that technology is out there doesn't necessarily mean that you get automatic access to it. Could you talk about some of the difficulties that your office has had in being able to just access the technologies and surveillance that is currently in place that at times your office hasn't had free and fair opportunity to view?
Yes, thank you for that. So one thing to know is that in general sessions, we are not entitled to discovery in a case. So we're not entitled to receive any of the electronic footage on the front end. And oftentimes we're getting it once a case has been bound over to the grand jury, and that case is on track for some sort of jury trial. We do have an agreement with the district attorney to allow us to get body camera footage in our cases in general sessions court. So we are able to access, we have to fill out a protective order and get a judge to sign it, but we're able to access body camera footage at least at the general sessions level. The storage and viewing of that is quite the problem though, because while the DA's office and the police have a direct connection with the server, well, it's in the cloud now, but with the process that allows to get the footage, we don't have that same build out. So we are relying on receiving that from the DA's office. We don't get the other electronic footage though in a case until that case has been indicted by a grand jury, which is often at least 4 months into the process.
And can you help me understand on that, on the access to the same footage and information that way that you're relying on it being sent? Is there a legal reason for that? Is it a technology issue or a combination?
It's a combination. We are hoping to navigate something that allows us to have our own server and own process with Motorola, but we have been unsuccessful at this point.
Okay, thank you for sharing that as well. How about any other questions? Councilmember Gregg, you're recognized.
Thank you so much for the information and for the work you do. I want to piggyback on Councilman Weiner. 2 words that you said stood out to me, and that is fair and ethical. And in line with that, and as she mentioned, I would love to see what you need to ensure that every case you have, that is first and foremost, because I think what you said is very important, and I want us to honor that.
I think it's a more robust answer than just what I need. It also requires the system to be committed to that same fairness, that same fair process. And so it's a little bit of all of that. It's a little bit of one, we have to put aside our immediate sort of moral reactions to hearing someone has been arrested and charged with whatever level crime it is, maybe something particularly heinous that causes us all to react. Obviously, our community is reeling from that right now. But we have to put aside our moral response to that and understand that no matter what somebody has been charged with, when they are first arrested and brought into custody, they're presumed innocent. And the process should honor that. The process should treat people like they are presumed innocent, which means that it shouldn't be a barrier for someone to be appointed a great attorney. We should expect that. We should expect someone have an excellent lawyer who will zealously fight for them. We should expect that to happen. We should expect for the process to allow us to actually represent people and do a good job doing it. We should well resource our public defender's office, and we should make sure that we're all working to actively eradicate the injustices that exist in every stage, which are there. There are some that are apparent, but a lot of what we experience is really rooted in the fact that we no longer presume people innocent. We just decide that they must have, especially in the context of what I heard around domestic violence, it's very easy to, it's very easy to say that what they have been charged with is particularly heinous. We're concerned about the repeat cycle that sometimes exists in that process. And the immediate response or answer to that is our instinct is to make sure we're doing all of this quickly, because that's what we think is the right answer, but it's not, because in the same vein, that person who has been charged, if we think about our own loved ones or just the constituents in your community before we would take away their liberty. And in many of these cases, we're talking about in misdemeanor court up to 11 months and 29 days in jail. In the criminal courts, though, you might be talking about on an aggravated assault, more than 30 years. You could be talking about a life sentence in some of these cases. Before we would sentence someone like that, we should all be committed to them having as fair of a process as possible. We cannot do that with extreme resource disparities for the public defender's office, and if we're not willing to push ourselves to remember the constitutional rights of the people who have been charged.
Thank you. What I hear you saying is a total mind shift in our process.
Correct.
I appreciate that and I value that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregg. Any other questions for Chief Defender Johnson? Yes, I really appreciate you. First of all, a couple things about Chief Defender Johnson I really appreciate. Number one, she watched the meetings that were recorded. Then she came to me and said, hey, I have a concern. Then we met in person. We talked about the concern, and then we found not necessarily a remedy, but opportunity for her to come and talk. And so I really appreciate that dynamic. And so thank you for doing all those things on the front end and also educating, having the opportunity to come in here and share with us and educating us at the same time. So I really appreciate you for doing that. And also Ms. Herbert for coming in as well. Since I see no other questions, we'll finish with Ms. Johnson's presentation. And I want to give an opportunity. Are there any department updates for anyone in the back that needs to share anything? I don't see anybody making a move to come up to the front. So I will just say that, can we send, oh, by the way, I meant to ask before I kind of started transitioning. This, the council office has this. Can this be disseminated to the committee? And yeah. Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will say that our next meeting, so Councilmember Johnston is going to be bringing back a resolution related to school safety that she had worked on in our last term. And so there'll be some discussion around school safety at our next meeting. So she intends on filing that timely for our next meeting. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. And then also, one of the things I wanted to mention, and maybe Councilmember Gregg, and I'll come to you, Councilmember Huffman, just a second. Councilmember Gregg, one of the things I wanted to mention, and this may be, it's definitely your wheelhouse, is, you know, thinking about like our term, or my first term, this term currently, last term, we had like issue after issue that was very traumatic and horrible and everything that was going on in the world. And so maybe you can provide some of your input on how us as council members, how we could make sure we're taking care of our mental health, since that is your specialty. Is that something you'd be willing to share? Okay, great. So that's been on my mind. And let me recognize Vice Chair Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up to an item that we've talked about in the last two meetings with the department, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think I saw Office of Homeless Services back there. If Director Calvin could step up.
Is this about pillows?
It is about pillows.
Oh, Lord. I'm sorry. Almost sorry.
Yeah, so just for anybody new that's not aware of this situation, there's a couple of us that are working on an effort to ensure that our cold weather facility for our unhoused friends is staffed with pillows to ensure for a good night's rest. Director Calvin's been working with us on implementing that. So just didn't know if you had an update on that.
So we ordered 500 pillowcases. They were 47 cents a piece. I think they came in right at the end of our multiple days throughout January, so early February, and we've not been back in shelters since then. So the one concern about some of the pillows is some of them are coming in stained, or I think we received 5 boxes, and maybe 2 of the boxes were we were not able to utilize. And so I think that Councilman Coupin has more pillows. He reached out to say that he had more that he was wanting to deliver. Our participants, rightfully so, we would not sleep on blood-stained pillows, so we would want to discard of the ones that we cannot utilize and then use a pillow protector or a pillowcase to cover the ones that we can utilize. So out of the 5 to 7 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 2 we could not utilize, and that meant we didn't have enough. So I think he has more. We're looking at opening again next week, kind of flirting with the idea of about 3 days, watching hour by hour. So we'll have more details by the end of this week.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other items for discussion? Otherwise, we're adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.